You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just tell me, what were you doing at the time, and what was the aha moment that kind of really kind of crystallized this opportunity for you?
In that second startup that I started in 2016, I was coming out of actually being part of the coding bootcamp world. And I had worked at a coding bootcamp. I actually was one of the first students at one of the first coding bootcamps because I wanted to learn to code in 2013. And so I worked at a coding bootcamp. And one of the things we kept running into was we'd find out like at the end of the program whether someone was a good admit or not. And all the data was gone before we could really update our algorithmic process to understand like who we should admit and who were going to have a harder time being able to find a job. And so I kind of took that experience into Mission U when we started, which was the 1 year online alternative to college. And from day one, the first person I hired was an engineer. The second person we hired was in systems. And we immediately started kind of with this premise that every conversation that's happening, whether it's a student or it's an internal meeting, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a client that we're trying to sell, that we're trying to pitch our students to, we should capture all of that because it's data that shouldn't be lost and ephemeral. And so I guess I had that insight 2 years before Grain. And so then Mission U kind of had a sudden demise. We'd raised $13 million. We had 8.5 left in the bank. And this was when WeWork's cap table was really, really big, and they were throwing their cap table around with their stock in large numbers. That basically kind of is how Mission U ended up getting acquired by WeWork, and they unfortunately shut down the school like soon thereafter. Even though it started in the acquisition as like we're going to have a we're going to have a Mission U in every WeWork. It ended up more realistically being about getting my co-founder to kind of go and work with WeWork. And I didn't really have any desire or interest to go work with WeWork. And so I got an intellectual property rights waiver. And I was even almost considering a pivot of like, let's just take this company and turn it into, what became Grain. But that's the main thing I wanted from the acquisition was an intellectual property rights waiver, be free and easy to, and clear to kind of build on that previous experience. So I guess in summary, like I was always looking from my first startup because I've been a co-pilot is what I call it twice. First time I was not the CEO, second time I was not the CEO, and third time I was the CEO. And I feel like it was always mysterious about like where you find that idea that can turn into like a real viable business. And what I had learned, and it turned out to be very true, is that the best ideas usually come in the process of solving your own problems, especially if you're in a business position trying to solve business problems. Then it's easier to identify B2B problems. Usually when startup founders are like trying to find an idea, at least when I do my kind of mentorship work, like 98% of the time they're consumer ideas, because that's what, is front and center in my life around like, I need a sports pickup app to, find other people to play tennis with. I can't tell you how many guys. I actually think there's actually some successful businesses that have that idea, but that idea gets found a lot as people are kind of trying to think of something to start. And I guess one more piece of flavor on that, I distinctly remember before I started my second company, I was like, I'm going to, be the CEO. That's going to be my idea. And my wife was like, no, you're not. It was a humbling moment because she knows me better than anybody. So we're out to dinner and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And she's like, you don't have like a very clear idea. You don't have, X and Y and Z. And I was like, dang, you're right. And so then I found my partner, my business partner, my second co-founder who had all of those things. And then I was able to learn a little bit more of those ropes. And by the time, we started Grain, I had the network of venture capitalists. I had the insight for a great idea, and my wife is very wise.